Good evening, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, and adepts, to the very first official episode of Knights of the Nephilim podcast. I will be your host on this mystical and marvelous journey that we call Magick. I am Freighter Crow, and I'm very excited to have you listening tonight. Whether listening live or streaming or downloading this after the fact, please make sure you click the like, share, and follow button. The more that you do that, the more that it moves us up the podcast community rankings, more people that discover the show, and ultimately the more that we can continue to do with the show. We will be bringing you anywhere from 2 to 3 episodes per month, Thursday nights, 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can always, like I said, if you missed the episode, listen back, stream it, or download it to your device to have it on the go. But like I said, 2 to 3 episodes per night or per month. And, it's something we look forward to presenting to you. We're going to be bringing on the biggest and best names in the occult, from authors to practitioners to researchers and ritual tool makers. So, a little bit of everything. We'll be covering all paths from Hindu to Hoodoo, from Kabbalah to chaos magic, from Enochian evocations to Goetic evocations, from Satanism to Santaria. So you name it, we will be bringing it on the show, talking about it, and certainly discussing different procedures and processes. Though, be warned, folks, it is a heavily influenced left-handed path show where we will talk a lot about Satanism, Luciferianism, black magic, and demonolatry. So, just keep in mind that, but have an open mind. You will certainly learn things that you did not know. You can always leave your input because we air ourselves across all platforms from iTunes to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, you name it, we are on it. So listen where you feel most comfortable. But if you would like to join us during the show, leave input, ask our guest questions, anything like that, you can do so by checking us out at Spreaker, which is our hosting company, and that is Spreaker at SPREAKER.com, or through Spreaker on the app market. That'll allow you to certainly instant message us during the show. I will read off your questions, and we will certainly make you a part of the show. We always encourage it. So make sure you check us out. And, thank you for tuning in tonight. We want to go ahead and, real quick, let me pull up here. I want to read you a little bit about our sponsors. Now, the way I'm going to set up this show compared to some of my other radio shows is a little bit differently. I'm going to talk about my sponsors very quickly, and then throughout the episode tonight, we will take 2 individual commercial breaks. During those commercial breaks, that'll allow us to do an actual spotlight on those sponsors in general. So first and foremost, I want to thank Goetic Impressions. I've bought equipment off of them and love what they make, love what they're doing. They make a lot of really great equipment. So we're going to talk about them here in a little bit, but much love to Goetic Impressions. The second sponsor of ours on the show is Limitless Liberation. Absolutely powerful tools. I am in the process of working with them on something special and handmade, which everything they make is handmade, for my specific temple and for my rituals coming up. So stay tuned for a little bit more on that, and we will jump into more about them. But as I said, you can check us out several times per month, anywhere you feel comfortable. Make sure you tell your family and friends. Make sure you learn something from the show because there's a lot to be had. We will always be bringing you the best names in the underground occult scene, and tonight is certainly no different. We do have Martin McGreggor, practicing Satanist and practitioner, also occult author. He has done some great work in the past, and we're going to be bringing him on the show here in just a minute to talk a little bit about who he is and what he does. If you have any questions, have any concerns, have any suggestions, please make sure you send us a email at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that is celestialoddities@gmail.com, because after all, that is my company that we host through. Celestial Oddities runs several different radio shows, Knights of the Nephilim being the newest, but you can also make sure that you check out our shows, Pair of Normal Guys and Oddworld, also uncovering the underground. So there's something for everybody across all platforms to enjoy. But without further ado, let's tell you a little bit about our special guest this evening. Our guest is Martin McGreggor, and he is an author, game designer, occultist, and theistic Satanist. For over 15 years, he has delved into the supposedly dark and dangerous teachings of the Old Ones without harm, employing aspects of demonology and thelema, as well as candle and sigil magic, has allowed McGreggor to craft his own personal satanic practice. Now, through his written works, he shares his philosophies and teachings that can help others form their own satanic practices as well. Martin was born in a small suburb of St. Louis, Missouri. He is an avid gamer and gambler, as well as an accomplished candle and mold maker. You can learn more about Martin and his work and get in touch with him at www.sinisterside.com. And he will be talking about it tonight, but he is the author of two great works. First and foremost, Paths of Satan, A Guide to Contemporary Satanism, and Books of the Fallen, Satanic Theory, Ethics, and Practice. Now, ladies and gentlemen, without delay, I would like to welcome onto the show Martin McGreggor. How you doing tonight, brother?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, man. I was glad to be able to get you on the show. I know that things didn't exactly come together how we originally planned. You were originally going to be the second guest on the show, but unfortunately, due to some scheduling conflicts, we had to kind of change that around, but that's okay. I am very happy to have you as the first guest on the show. Love your works and books that you've put out, something I look forward to picking your brain on tonight and talking more about. So, I think we should kind of introduce who you are and a little bit about you. I like to start out most of my shows and most of my interviews that I do across any of my shows very traditionally. And I thought that it would be a good idea to tell me, and tell the listeners maybe a little bit about your upbringing. I mean, what kind of, religious background did you come up from? Did you come up in a pagan-style background, or were you like myself who kind of was the oddball out and came up in a Catholic Christian background? I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
It's actually a pretty funny story. My family was traditionally Catholic until I think around the mid-'80s, right around when I was born. And I don't know if it's 100% accurate or not, but there's a story that kind of goes around in my family that my grandpa had 5 kids, my dad's dad. And in the mid-'80s, the Pope came out against contraception. And apparently that was when he had his throwing his hands up in the sky moment and basically just gave up on it and said, I can't do it. I already have 5 kids and I'm not going to let my religion dictate, having, 5 more. So he kind of fell by the wayside right there. But my grandma continued to go, and she started to go to a Baptist church. And that's pretty much what I was brought up in. She would take me to church on Sundays. And it stuck for a little while. And I always kind of felt a certain connection there, but also not a connection there. It wasn't right. And I'd say probably, like most people, 11, 12, 13, somewhere around that side, I basically just kind of stopped going into anything organized. And I started to consider myself, I believe, agnostic at that point.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I mean, very similar. Like I said, I grew up in a Catholic background, and the only one in my family who ever certainly got involved into the occult and in the left-hand path and anything of that nature. And I never seemed to fit with the mold of what I was being taught. Now, I'll be the first to tell you there's a lot of people in our lifestyle and in the occult and the left-hand path that'll slander and say, who cares about learning any of that? I think that learning a lot about the Bible and Christianity and learning a lot about that specific religion and their views was very important, not only into forming me to who I am today in my own practice, but also to really understand more of the full spectrum and have a much bigger, broader view of Satanism and how the story was so twisted and so spun in a different light to make so many things look to be of a nature that they weren't.
Yeah, I completely agree. You never want to just completely shut yourself off from any source of information. I think that's an important thing. A core value of Satanism is to open yourself up to all learnings and all teachings, and then take what you want, take what is valuable to you, and leave everything else by the wayside. And I don't think that you should limit yourself in any direction regarding that. Now, as far as just Christian teachings in general. Yeah, there's been a lot of twisting and just complete destruction of what was before, and they put a new face on it to adapt to what they were trying to sell. So when you're talking about someone's personal practice, it's very hard to come up in that environment and come up with anything original, and that's why I felt like it was a good idea to write sort of the style books that I do, to help people have a basis to craft their own practice.
No, it's important for people to know how to do that, because there's so many books, like we were talking about, a little bit before the show, and we'll jump into here shortly, but there is so many different practices to teach you grimoire magic or to teach you this or that, but it already sets itself at a bar that you have to be a practitioner to really understand it, or be advanced to be able to use it. But how often does something really tell you how to get started properly? And you did that in your books, which we will dive into. Now, before I jump into that, though, knowing your background and knowing how you started out, when was the defining moment that you decided, I'm going to go this path and separate myself from what my family believes and separate myself from their practices, and kind of discovered the occult side? Around what age were you, and how did that all come about?
That was basically when I was about 18 years old, and I have to give my best friend at the time credit for that. He was working with me at a family business. We ran an internet LAN center back in the day, before broadband really became really prevalent, and you still had to go somewhere to get really high-speed internet. We ran an internet cafe and a coffee shop, and my best friend worked there with me. And one day, I think he just ended up picking up the Satanic Bible. He got into it at some point, I'm not quite sure when, but he read it. So when he was done, he gave it to me and I read it. And that just kind of sent us both down the rabbit hole, so to speak. We started hitting the internet and hitting the normal sites. And really it just kind of spiraled from there into us finally doing a dedication ritual right around this time, about 13 or 17 years ago. It was November 2nd in 2003. So yeah, it was, it was the Satanic Bible, then it was Satanic rituals, did a lot of the Franz Barden, Initiation into Hermetics. Frabado the Magician is a great work. If you haven't read that one, I absolutely recommend reading that one. It's a short work, but it's great. It's really fun to read. And I think the Theistic Satanism.net, I think that's the address, but Diana Vere's site, that's a great resource for people. That was very instrumental to me in the beginning. And really, yeah, me and my best friend, we just kind of went down it together and read and shot stuff off each other, and we did it together.
No, that's great to be able to have a friend to share that in. I mean, I think, and I was going to say, it's funny to hear that me and you started out the same, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who would say that same thing, as far as, I think the Satanic Bible and the Satanic Rituals, both of those books back to back literally are my first two that I got into in the occult and opened my eyes. So, shout out to Antoine LaVey for obviously just launching the occult and Satanism and the left-handed path to the forefront, and doing something that no one at that time period had the balls to step forward and just be like, hey, listen, it is what it is, and this is what I'm about. And it launched my practice as well. And to be honest with you, at 17 years old, and right around the same time period you started, about 17 years ago, it had massive success beyond what I thought was even possible. I mean, your first book, Paths to Satan, describes the different forms of Satanism, from theistic Satanism to atheistic Satanism to your traditional high school, I think I'm a rebel devil worshiper. And I think that I was a little bit more on that side in high school. I wore all black. I had devil pentagrams on me all the time. I had long hair to my shoulders. And even though I did study more than most of the kids that talked about Satanism, I think I thought I was a badass. If you would ask me at the time, I wouldn't have said that, but looking back now, I think I thought I was the shit. And I started performing these rituals with hope of them working, but not really. I mean, I think in the back of my head thinking they would. And the first time I ever performed a ritual was a mixture of the Lamesse Noor on the Black Mass mixed with a blind evocation. And it worked. And I was 17 years old, and I was able to conjure and, evoke a entity into full manifestation in front of me the very first time. And I was with two buddies, similar to you. I had friends, but they weren't into it. They were just kind of along for the ride. And I think that was the one and done for them. They seen it, they were part of it, they left it. But it opened my eyes, and I spent years after that researching and digging deeper into so many other works and tomes to realize and understand my power and what I could do. And then picked up years later with the rituals again. I wanted to really be versed because I realized I was able to open doorways, that they're truly out there, but I shouldn't do so unprepared, and I did that the first time. But, you know, it's just similar to our stories. We both kind of started out the same way, so I love hearing that.
Well, yeah, no, and, you know, some of the criticism of my work in the past has been that I put kind of a negative slant on the whole like devil worshiper side of things, and it's probably true to a certain extent, but that doesn't mean I don't recognize that there is a very important aspect of that, especially when a lot of people do start this path in their adolescent and teen years, when that angst and that rebellion is right, you know, alongside with how they naturally feel. So I don't ever want it to come off like, you know, I really look down on that. I think that is an important part and an important aspect of a lot of people's paths. But I think it's something that most people, you know, kind of mature out of after those certain years, and they do start looking into the real texts and the real learning behind things.
I agree. I mean, I do think it's important because I think it starts with rebellion. I think it's probably part of the reason that it gets a bad name is because you have a lot of people out there just talking nonsense because they are in that mind state, but actually that mind state's what helps end up making the intellectual ones years later. I think it's just a part of teenage angst, but, you know, at some point you got to shed that skin and certainly take on a new one, because you still do have adults that are out there and they're more of the devil worshiper side than the actual occult. And when you start asking them really their knowledge behind what it is that they're talking about, they can't give you a whole lot. It's just, you know, hell Satan, hell the devil, you know, like I wear, you know, like I said, like I was in high school, wear all black, I'm a rebel. But there's no theology, there's no knowledge, there's no backing behind anything that they think they know. Short side story, not to sidetrack us from our interview, but there was a girl who just yesterday on Facebook, and I'm sorry to, you know, send shots at you, lady, but she put up a post that says, "I effing hate fake Satanists." And I said, so you mean 90% of the underground occult scene? Which I stand behind that statement. I think a lot of people pretend to be something they're not. And she said it pretty much, long story short, she just lost her boyfriend because he wasn't a true Satanist. He didn't believe in the entities that she believed in, which was Lucifer, Belial, Satan. And I said, okay, so you're saying he's not a Satanist for not believing in actual entities of these beings. I says, but if he's still a Satanist, I says that would make him an atheistic Satanist. Well, he believes in LaVey. I says, well, I would hope he believes in LaVey because he was a real man. Kind of busting her balls a little bit. But then I said, so what you're saying is he believes in LaVey and follows him. I says, well, LaVey believed in his later years that they were not beings and they were part of his own current of himself, and that there wasn't beings and that they were awakening the God force currents within yourself. I said, so therefore your boyfriend is very much a real Satanist. He's just not the same type of Satanist as you. And then she deleted me and then blocked the post, or deleted the post. But it was just funny because, once again, someone's sprouting a post saying, I effing hate fake Satanists, but at the same time, she had no knowledge of what Satanism actually was. So it just blows my mind that you catch a lot of that in the scene, which brings me to my next question. What do you think the biggest misunderstanding is when it comes to Satanism?
Well, I think that you just really touched on it, and that's the belief that there is one true Satanism, that if you don't believe that particular style or brand or flavor of it, that you're not a true Satanist at all, and there's really nothing further from the truth that you could possibly be. You know, not to go completely off topic there, but, you know, LaVey was a very ambiguous man, and I think he had at very numerous times opportunity to set down in concrete exactly what his thoughts were and exactly what his beliefs were, and anything else is wrong. And to my knowledge, he never really straight up did that, and I think it was for a very important purpose, and I think it was on purpose. So just to touch on that there. But yeah, the biggest problem is people who, and I hate to use the term gatekeeping, because a certain amount of that is good. A certain amount of that is a reason why I wrote my second book, and that's because people should have a basis and a grounding in actual theology and belief and what has come before, for them to base their ideas, and not to put anybody on blast. But I see it on social media. Fucking Twitter is not a legitimate source for occult knowledge, Satanism, or anything else besides. I'm sorry, do not direct me to some organization's Twitter feed as a source of this is the official knowledge. It's like, no, that's not the official knowledge at all. So there's a personal gnosis that's a part of Satanism. I'm a strong believer that you can be an atheistic Satanist and be a true Satanist, and you can also be influenced by what theistic Satanists would consider Satan, even without necessarily believing or worshiping or trying to actively become a part of that. I think this is a way more complicated subject than a lot of people want to treat it as. So you need to leave as much room for you to be wrong as possible, to put it very plainly, and that's something that I'll stand by all day long. You need to leave room to reevaluate your views when things become sticky. And if you don't do that, you're going to put yourself in a really tricky position. You're going to find yourself having some panicked moments in the deep, dark night whenever things don't necessarily add up the way that you were absolutely sure they were. So let people do their own thing. Let people find Satan in their own way. Let them practice Satanism in their own way. And you're probably going to be a lot, happier for it.
I agree. I mean, there is no one set way, and I think if you believe that there only is one end-all belief, and this is exactly how it is, you're probably not going to last long or be very successful in your practices. Now, you have a lot of people that just read and research, and they're part of the left-hand path, but they're not a practitioner. I mean, that's a big thing that any listener out there needs to understand, is you have people who are strictly researchers, readers, and in practice in that regard, but never once pick up a ceremonial dagger, never once stand in the temple, never once summon anything, and that's okay. But you have a lot of people who talk about things that they don't understand, and will talk about the science behind evocation or summoning, and they've never once stepped into the ritual chamber in their life. So you can't really say, because as you start to summon these forces, as you start to commune with them, you will realize that a lot of things you think you knew, you don't know. And I couldn't tell you how many countless times I have been just knocked on my ass with completely different information than I thought I knew. And I had to step back, reevaluate, reanalyze, come back stronger, only to get knocked on my ass again. But each and every time, it strengthens you, it strengthens your belief, it strengthens your knowledge, but it keeps you in an open state to know that there is no absolutes. There is theories, there is ideas, there is certainly, I think we can all agree, a dark flame current that is flowing. That whether it's in just yourself and you awaken it, or whether it is an external force, there is a current there that can be tapped into. But it will time and time again surprise you and be different than you think it is.
Yeah, and it can become very clear very quickly when somebody is talking about things that they haven't actually experienced or actually done. I had a conversation with someone here recently where he was a Luciferian that had converted from a highly Christian background, and had subsequently went back to his Christian beliefs. And he was speaking about just how demons promise you this and demons will give you that temporarily, and all your dreams and wishes and desires and all this stuff comes true, but then in the end they're going to come through and they're going to take it all away, and you're going to be left with nothing, and you're going to be in the ruins of your life and all this stuff. And it just totally betrays a complete ignorance about what actual demon work is, and what these entities actually do, and what they bring out of you, and what does happen if you're not prepared for that. And I don't mean just doing something wrong in ritual, or not prescribing to a right, ritual practice or something like that. I'm talking about if your wife isn't straight, if your wife isn't prepared for the changes that you've asked for, they'll go ahead and free things up and make it to where it is. And sometimes that's going to be very violently. So people who talk about this, you're going to get your riches for just a little while and then get destroyed by it. It just completely betrays a complete lack of any real practice or knowledge in the subject.
I think that's it. I mean, you're always going to have these people that gloat like, I was able to summon Belial in seconds and he and I conversate constantly. And then like you start to talk deeper and you're like, this guy has never once lit a candle and picked up a dagger. Like I said, like, buddy, I know I can tell you already that you haven't, but tell me your fantasy story. And I think that's the thing with what you just said. Yes, it's going to clear your path. It is going to... Whatever force you're working with is going to change things in your life for the better, for what you want. But sometimes for the better means you're going to walk through fire before you certainly reach that point. That's the side effect of it. And that's the big thing that I always like to talk about when you work with daemon spirits, is that they bring a side effect to them. And that side effect, as you mentioned in your books, is you have to be willing to understand and accept what it is you've chose to do and take responsibility for it, because it might clear your path and give you the job you want, but it might get you fired from your job tomorrow. It might leave you on the streets for 2 months. It might leave you fending and thinking about ending your life because you don't have anything going good for you. And only when you are in that position, at your lowest, you bump into the stranger that gives you the opportunity of your lifetime. And that's how it works. And people don't understand it. They think, oh, he's just going to drop a pot of gold in front of my legs, or he does that and then he's going to take it back. No, it's a steady course, but there's going to be some bumps in the road.
Absolutely, yeah. And, not to oversimplify things or, just completely, make a situation out of nothing, but let's say that you contact a particular daemon to increase your physical strength. You are a puny little person and you're sick of it. You want to be the strongest, most powerful person you could possibly be, but you're also not very motivated. You don't care enough to do it yourself, so now you're just looking for the easy fix, the outside source to make it happen. Well, okay, you just so happen to actually tap into that current. You actually happen to summon that daemon, and they're going to come after you now, and they're going to do it for you. So the result of that might be you get a new neighbor who's now going to mess you up every single day. He's going to mess with you and bug you and make you feel threatened until you actually do get that motivation to get off your ass, go do the things that are going to make you strong. And I don't mean to say that's exactly what would happen, but that is how people need to think about it. When they contact these entities and they ask for things, they need to look at their life and look at, well, what's going to happen in my life for this to actually occur? And if that isn't a happy thought, if that doesn't evoke, what you're looking for your life to look like, then maybe you should rethink the working that you're thinking of doing, because this is the way that, in my experience, these entities work. They will give you what you want, but you're going to have to, get there naturally. It's not going to just occur like magic. It's, like you said, it's going to have to flow.
It does have to flow, and I love how you put that hey, I want to be big, I want to be monstrous, but I don't want to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and be lazy all day. Then, yeah, you get the neighbor or the guy that beats you up all the time until you finally say, I'm sick of this, I'm sick of getting hit, I'm going to lift. They make you do what you ask for. If you were going to ask for it, the biggest mistake you can make, folks, is if you were going to work with these currents, you were going to call upon these gods and ask them for help, you better damn well listen to what they have to say, because there's nothing more offensive in my book than to ask a true powerful spirit for help, and then when it gives it to you and gives you the knowledge of what you need, you turn your back on it. Because it's not going to work in your favor, because sometimes they put it in motion without you realizing it or not, and you might burn a bridge, so to speak, with that specific force. And that was actually one of my questions tonight, is what is your thoughts on repairing demonic relationships if you've absolutely bombed a past communication? I know some practitioners think that you can burn the bridge and not be able to really work with that spirit again. Some think that there are ways of of, each and every time you call it, it's like a new slate. What is your take on that?
I would absolutely have to say circumstance is going to govern that situation, because it's going to, like most things in the occult and magic, it's going to be determined by your intent. It's going to, what was the level of the, I hate to use this word, but betrayal. If you had a pact to do something and you didn't do it, why didn't you do it? Was it a sheer you forgot? Was it laziness? Was it a honest, oh God, I really didn't mean this and I need to go back and praise Jesus? It's all these different things. The level of that betrayal is going to dictate, what they're going to do. If you make a pact with a demon to try to do something, and then it occurs, and then you just flat out laugh and say, ha ha ha, I got over on that one, and then refuse to do what you made a pact to do, then I would say there's no going back on that, and you're going to absolutely regret what happens to you for doing it. But if, like I said, you have you make a mistake, or you really did mean to do something, and circumstances outside your control made it not happen or something, there are absolutely ways that you're gonna fix that, and it's gonna be do the things that you did to originally create that relationship. Go back to your practice, spend time doing the work, spend time communing with that spirit, with that entity, and yeah, you will be able to fix that over time. Now, like I said, I think there are probably some things that you're not going to come back from, but to reach that point, I don't see why you would try to go back again unless you're really just that stupid.
Yeah, I mean, if you call upon a spirit a second time after burning them, I mean, you're going to want to make sure that you listen the second time, because if you do it again, yeah, you're not going to want to try to revisit that a third. That's for sure. It could have very irreversible consequences on yourself, that's for sure. But I find that, important, because I find, like we were just talking about, people who ask for the advice and then not take it and blatantly ignore the advice. And I'm thinking, how could you be in the presence of such power? And if you're able to pull it off and do, an evocation, especially, I mean, invocation's different, but if you're able to fully bring something here and see it and speak to it and then ignore it, I think that is a spit in the face. So if you get a second chance, you better damn well take it. But I find that a lot, that people don't listen, and it's not easy. I mean, things they're going to tell you or they're going to put into effect into your life are not going to be desirable. I mean, I when I started my practice, it changed everything. It changed morning routines of getting up and working out at 4:30 in the morning and lifting and exercising and strengthening the body to strengthen the mind. And these were things that became alive in me. It wasn't even anymore that it was like my free will. It was, which it was, but it was that this hunger grew inside of me, and it made me say, you know what, I'm not sleeping in anymore. I'm not going to get rest. I'm going to do what is needed to be done, because this is what was asked of me. These are the thoughts that were given to me, that in order for true power, I have to follow the path that was recommended to me from my patron daemon. And I've done that, and the results over the period of time have been just phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that, daemons and Satan in particular are testers. They are going to test you for what you want. So you need to be prepared to take on those tests and pass them if you want to reap the reward. I actually spoke about that in Book of the Fallen in the Curses section. And similar to the line of thought that we're just talking about right here, in my experience, a lot of times there will be a moment, especially if it's someone that is close to you. If you're not like doing a curse on somebody for money or something like that, if you're cursing somebody close to you that you're going to have an option to seal that curse in real life. It's not going to happen in the ritual chamber. It's not going to happen in the temple. You're going to be out in life, and something's going to happen. And if you're paying attention, you're going to go, I have the opportunity to seal this. If I take this route, they are done. If I take this other route, I've done it all for nothing. And if you take that latter route, it's all for nothing route, you're going to have a lot of work to do to get back to where you were spiritually. You're going to take a hit for that. So that's why it's important. If you're going to do these things, if you're going to do these style workings, you need to commit. People say that, and they think that means one thing, but it really means you need to commit. You need to realize the repercussions, welcome the repercussions, and make them happen when that opportunity comes.
I think, yeah, you need to know them before even going in, especially with doing any type of baneful magic and curses of any sort. that it should never be something that you light the candles, you get to focus, you meditate and clear your mind, you are ready to cast this, you cast it, and then the next day you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Exactly. Like, some people treat this as like a form of catharsis, where they do the working, and then, you know, the next day they're like, oh man, I feel so much better, I'm done with that. No, you need to still have that fire. You need to have that the next time I see them, I want to watch them burn. And if you have that, then it's gonna be powerful, and it's gonna work, and you're not gonna, in my experience, feel too much of a kickback from that. But that is the resolve I think you need to have if you're going to, you know, resolve yourself on doing those type of workings.
No, I agree. I mean, it's not going to have the effect you want if you feel bad from it. It's going to possibly have irreversible effects back on you. Like I said, it can boomerang back. You have to be able to see that person that you've casted on each and every time and be like, I'm watching you slowly burn. And you need to feel good about it. And that's, a lot of people say, that's sick. Well, you know what? It is sick. And if you're doing baneful magic, that's the goddamn point. So if you know, you feel bad about it, this isn't the path for you. Go to church. Well, maybe not even that. Maybe you need to reevaluate why you're doing it. You know, if their transgression wasn't that bad, then why are you looking to curse them in the first place? True.
You know, they should be doing this out of a absolute desire, wholehearted. They deserve this. And if you don't have that, then don't go to the gods for this shit.
Like, no, I agree. That's a very strong statement, because oh man, they called me a name, I'm going to curse them. You know what I mean? Or something so simplistic that you're pulling out the big guns for, and it's like, no, just suck it up and move about your day. This needs to be, they did something big for you or against you, that you are pulling out the heavy artillery, and then you need to stand by. Once you hit the launch button, there's no pulling the missile back. It's fired. You need to ride that baby out to the very end and support your decision on hitting the button.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, I said earlier about what do you think the biggest, you know, misconception of Satanism is. Something similar to that is, what do you think the biggest mistake for someone that is practicing Satanism or practicing the left-hand path of any sort might be, as far as stunning their progression? What, when they first get into ritualistic magic, especially on the left-handed path side, what do you think is the mistake that they're making time and time again, that they're feeling like, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not succeeding, I'm having trouble, I'm not getting the full power and strength out of this ritual? You know, what do you think is that shortcoming that, you know, often happens to someone starting out at a neophyte stage?
I think probably the most common thing would be this desire to make sure you're doing everything absolutely correct, as if there were such a thing. I think people generally attach themselves, they associate themselves with maybe one or two particular practices or authors, and then they believe that that is the end-all, be-all of all magic, and that's what works, and that's it. And then they get in trouble whenever they go from reading those books to actually trying to practice the magic, and maybe they aren't getting the results that they're looking for. So people need to be a lot more open, I think, than they are. They need to read as much as they can from as many different sources, and look at as many different practices as possible and find what works for them. I really do believe that, yes, there are practices that work and practices that don't work. I do believe that, but I also believe there is a huge personal element to this, where people are going to get different results based on the different things that they can do. People have natural gifts that are drastically different than the next person. I am not very clairvoyant at all. I have a hard time with clairvoyance. With clairsentience and clairaudience, I'm a little bit different. So I have to adapt my practice to things that work towards my goal, my gifts, unless I want to spend all of my time just trying to get my other gifts to a position where they're also just as applicable. And you can do that. A lot of people try to do that. That's also a big problem, is they go, well, if I can't do that, then I just need to learn how to do that. And I mean, yeah, you can, but people have natural gifts for a reason. So if you spend time focusing on yourself and you spend time focusing on and learning and discovering what is unique about you and what you can do with your magic, and then follow that path down the different books and authors and different resources that are available to you now, that is the path to success, in my opinion. To really focus on yourself and figure out what you're associating with, what you're feeling power from, and then go down there, follow that, go down that rabbit hole. And don't try to just, listen to people online and listen to people who are telling you this or telling you that. Do it yourself. Read as much as you can, do as much of it as you can, and then, write it down, journal it. Make sure you can go back and discover which ones worked for you and which ones didn't, and then follow up on it.
No, that's important. I think one of the strongest things a magician has in their wheelhouse to use is their journal. Go back and read about your accomplishments, about your mistakes, about your shortcomings. Figure out what you did wrong, figure out what you did right. If you just try to keep it in your head and keep a mental log, you're going to forget so much, especially when it comes to high ceremonial magic and it comes to evocation, because there is a great deal of time spent in trance-like states that it's going to be a blur. And if you don't jot that down quickly afterwards, you're not going to remember a lot of those times, and especially a lot of the things that can be taught to you by the daemon spirits. So, you need to log that down and have something to go back to. And as Martin said, one of the things I think people have a misconception of when getting into magic is that you are going to be awesome at it all. That somehow magic is this awesome door that you open and now you are God in all senses. No, you can certainly open God-like abilities. You can certainly strengthen things. You can even be well-rounded at most. But you're not going to have it all. You're not going to be a master of scrying, a master of invocation and evocation, a master of reading minds and seeing the future. You can do all of these things, but you have to pick your strong suits and find out, what do I have a natural ability and what do I resonate with? And let's focus on those and launch those into a whole new level and still stay rounded at the others. But I find so many practitioners that I talk to are dividing their main attention amongst 15 different things. And yes, you are a jack of all trades and a master of none. I would rather be a master of 3 things than half-assed on 15.
Well, yeah, and it's also important to think about, what do you want your time to be spent doing? Do you want to spend your time actually communing with spirits and entities and learning about yourself and growing your spirituality, or do you want to spend all your time training all of these different skills and traits and abilities to eventually do that somewhere along the line? Why wait? Why wait until you have all of these different things mastered to start trying to go down this path, when figure out what you're good at, do the practice and do the things that you want to do with these spirits using those tools, and you can work on everything else in the meantime. But a lot of people, they really stunt their progress at the beginning, waiting to be a master of all these things, because that's when they can suddenly start doing the real work. And no, start doing the real work immediately.
Real shit, because I don't know how many times people told me, like, oh man, I've been working up to stepping inside the circle. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, I've been reading, studying for 10 years. I'm not there yet, but I'm getting close. I'm like, you spent 10 years studying, you haven't stepped inside the circle yet? Like, what are you waiting for? Like, get in there and just try it, learn. Yes, it's scary, and it's going to have some repercussions like we talked about earlier. There's going to be things you learn. There's going to be things you love. There's going to be things you don't. But you're not going to know and really gain the traction that you need until you have that firsthand experience. So many authors in the occult world, and I'm going to throw some shots right now, a lot of authors in the occult world don't even practice. They write about it. They have great theories. As far as theology, as far as ideas and philosophy, they have it. But they don't actually practice what they write about. And that's okay. We need people with those theories. But it's never going to help you until you really stand in the circle or do whatever, look into the mirror, whatever it might be that you have a strong suit in. You have to do it, because just like riding a bike, you can read books on riding a bike, but until you climb on the damn thing, you're not going to know how to actually ride it. And that's the biggest thing, folks. If you really want to experience the occult, obviously get a foundation. Don't just jump right in. But after you have a little bit of knowledge, step in, try it out, and learn from your mistakes and grow from that. Don't spend years and years and years researching to maybe someday do it.
Yeah, I would completely agree. You know, I think there's a certain current within the community that feels like, you know, if you're not using the oldest methods or the most, you know, historically accurate methods, you're not doing it right. And I have found, and other people might have different experiences, but in my experience, I found the strictest practitioners, the ones that are the most by the book in all regards, are the ones practicing the least magic. Because when you get inside the circle, when you get inside the temple, a lot of this stuff is throwing, you know, stimuli at you to find out what's going to work and what isn't. And I think a lot of mastering practice is figuring out what you can get rid of and what at the bare minimum you can get away with to pull off what you need to do. And I think, you know, a lot of people who are sticklers for a lot of the you know, just absolute details in all things, you know, they're probably not doing as much as the person who is saying, all I need is this, and this, and we're good to go. And that's just the experience that I've had.
No, I stand by that. I agree with you that there's nothing wrong with being a traditionalist and wanting to stick by the book, but the problem with that is it is so... what's the word I want to use? It's so saturated with so many rules and so many things that you have to do in such a specific order that it might take you 2 months to set up one ritual to do it the exact way that it says to do it. And that's great. Maybe you have a hell of a time during that one ritual, and maybe that's all you need. And you do 6 rituals a year and hey, you're set. I would rather do 30 and still have very good results. Now, I'm not trying to say I'm willing to take a watered-down version compared to the real thing. I have some very great results, but to me, you spend so much time on preparation for it to be over so quickly that, as you said, you can over time, with experience of doing it over and over and over again, learn what you can shave off that still gives you a very successful happening. And you're allowed to do it more often and able to do it more often. Whereas if you are only doing it every 2 months, you don't experiment because you're afraid if you spend all that time practicing and you're going to mess it up. So you stick exactly to the book. But when you experiment is when things happen. And honestly, when you experiment, I think is when you open up doors aside from the text that you learn from. Solomonic magic is great. I started out with a Goetia. I think a lot of really heavy, evocators have. But let's face it, it is very, very thick on what they require you to summon. And you can do it that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of what is said in the Goetia is not needed in order to do your work. It's important. You should learn it. You should study it. You should even practice it. But I don't think that's an end-all. And the people that strictly still stick with the Solomonic form of evocation, I think are missing out on a lot of other opportunities. Plus, I'm kind of biased on it. I don't believe in forcing demons and restricting them by god names and beating them down with a blasting rod. It's not really my way of... I'm in reverence whenever I am summoning. I am not the guy with a heart on standing there saying like, oh, I force demons into the corner. That's not my take on it. But if that is, feel free to do what you want to do, I guess. But I just think that there's a lot to be had and a lot missed if you stick to 100% one way and that's all.
Yeah, especially when it comes to Goetic stuff and Solomonic magic, like you said, it can be very thick. And I think for people first starting out, it can be entirely too much because it becomes a thing where they are doing so much preparation, and there's so many details, and there's so many things to think about and focus on and correlate and make sure it's right, that when they step into that circle, all of it has been on the minutia. All of it has been on that. And they don't know that it's still going to have to come from within. It's still going to have to be them doing the work. So a lot of times they kind of stand in the circle and wait for something to happen when, it's like you have to be just in the moment. You have to be still pulling all these things together yourself. And all you've done is just put together this much more elaborate construct for the working. And some people can do a lot with that. That's absolutely true. But for beginners and people who are just getting into it, and a lot of times their first thing is a Solomonic Goetic text, it's going to be too much. It just honestly is. Now, this is something, let's get into the thick of it here. When you're talking about using a more aggressive summoning method, people call it spirit abuse. In my earlier practice, I would have been very much against it. I would very much rail against it, and I was much like your feeling of I'm in reverence when I'm in the circle. I am worshiping these entities. That is my practice. But when you think about it truthfully, when you look at things from a higher level and you try to discern what is happening, and you try not to discredit other people's experience, because I do have people that I respect that practice Solomonic and Goetic magic, and I don't just believe that they're lying. I don't believe that they're not doing what they say they are doing and getting the results they say they are getting. So how do you, how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that with not believing that angelic magic is higher than demonic or daemonic magic? How do you reconcile those two workings, both of them being able to be successful right alongside each other? And in my opinion, after the years of practice that I have, I'm more and more starting to believe that the daemons and the entities that we are connecting with probably could give a shit less. Whether or not we're respectful when we do it or we're not respectful when we do it. What they want is the results and to see that you're doing the work. And then if they deem that that is happening, then they'll give you the results that you're needing, regardless of the way that you approach it. And that's also a big reason why I don't have to have a problem with atheistic leaning Satanists, because I do believe that while I am a theist and I do believe in these entities as beings, I don't have a precursor to that. I don't have to say that they believe they exist in a particular manner. I'm not trying to win that fight. So along that same lines with the spirit abuse and blasting rods and names of God, if I'm not willing to call all those people liars, then I have to reconcile the fact that their magic can work right alongside my magic. And the only way to explain that in my mind is that the daemons are willing to work with whoever's willing to do the work.
No, I agree, because I started out with the methods that I said, with the true Solomonic Goetian magic, with the using of God names, with the demanding results, and it works. It certainly does work. And I think because I really was always alone in my pursuit, and even still am to today, I've met a lot of people along the way that will sometimes work together and do things of that nature, but it's mainly been a solitary practice. When I started out, I read the Goetia, and I studied that. That was, to me, the only method I knew at that time. So that's what I had to do. But over time, when I realized, the respect method, the showing reverence, the worshiping these beings as gods rather than treating them like slaves, it gave me just as good, in fact, actually much better results. That was for me. No, by no means am I saying that I'm against someone that has to use the other method. I mean, you're working with dangerous forces, and if you feel that you have to use angelic names to restrict them, there is a lot of power in Enochian magic and with angels. There certainly is. I've done it. I was a part of the Golden Dawn. We did Enochian magic, and it's wonderful. I tend to steer away from that and stick more to the daemon side, but I just don't go that method anymore. So there's nothing wrong with it, but like you said, kind of we can simplify down the rituals and have the same results. You can ask your neighbor to you can go beat your neighbor into submission to doing you a favor. You can go knock on his door and ask him politely. You might get the same result at the end of the day, but which one's really the better one to go? And for me, it's just asking for the work to be done rather than, showing my force. But before we go much further on that, I want to take a quick commercial break. We're going to do our first sponsor spotlight, and we'll be coming back in just a moment. If you are listening out there, folks, this is Knights of the Nephilim podcast. We have Martin McGreggor on the line, and we will be right back. All right, so folks, the first spotlight of the evening is our sponsor, Goetic Impressions. Great company. If you haven't heard of them, you certainly need to check them out. I'm going to go ahead and read you a little bit about them. Goetic Impressions formed as a partnership between Ben, Frater Adamastro, and Sor Alara, with the intention to bring ritual, accurate magical tools to the public for affordable prices. One of the largest barriers to entry for new practitioners looking to experiment with magic of the Western grimoires is how expensive and difficult it is to find real ritual tools at a great price. They first launched with a Kickstarter to bring their Goetic medallions to life, and since then have also expanded with an Enochian toolset, and most recently a Satanic medallion and altar set, which is currently live on Kickstarter. With over 20 years of magical and occult experience across a range of traditions, Goetic Impressions is the place to find affordable, high-quality ritual items. And you can check them out at www.goeticimpressions.com. And if you use promo code KOTN1020, that is KOTN1020, you'll get 10% off of your overall order from the beginning of October until the end, October 31st, Halloween night. It'll end at midnight. Unfortunately, we're presenting that to you now. We had that planned since the beginning of the month, but as I said, our first guest had some conflictions with his scheduling, and we had to push back our launch 3 weeks. So it is still live at this point to be able to use that promo code until the end of the month, and that's for 10% off your overall order at goeticimpressions.com, KOTN1020 for your promo code. All right, guys, we're back on Knights of the Nephilim podcast, and for the last hour, we've been hanging out with Martin McGreggor, the author of 2 wonderful books, Path to Satan and Book of the Fallen, I can't talk, and, we've been diving into a lot of different things on magic. I want to finish up our current talk that we had just prior to the break, and then we're going to jump a little bit more into his book, but one of the things I wanted to say is, talking about traditional Goetic forms of evocation, which I still think has held true through most evocation practices of using a circle of protection and using a triangle of manifestation. Some people and most people still use that method. Some people feel that there is no need for those things. I want to get your take on it. When evoking and when summoning, how important do you feel as a practitioner it is to have the circle and the triangle?
100% it depends on who you are and who you are summoning. If you are a, legitimate hardcore Satanist and, have done all the initiation rites and everything like that, and you are summoning a demon or an entity that is traditionally known to be associated with Satan, I think you're fairly safe. I think you don't need, I would never use one for any entity like that. And to be honest, for most of the entities that people would casually, I don't want to use that word, but for most of the entities people work with on a consistent basis often, you probably aren't in very much risk. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't demons and entities out there that aren't associated with Satan, Christ, Christian beliefs, any of that style of theology at all. There are very different demons out there that are just straight up hostile to humanity. And if you're going to start dealing with some of those entities, you need to take protections. Now, I don't know if a Solomonic, circle of protection would be what you're looking for in that case. Personally, I probably think it would not. You would want to use something a lot different, but not to get too deep into the rabbit hole there. It really does depend on who you're calling and who you are. I think a lot of this goes to the cultural associations that people have in their contemporary climate and, you know, the society that they live in. If you look at the societies that these Western magic practices are coming from, they are highly Christianized, dogmatic societies. That was what civilization was evolved around in a lot of cases. So it is no surprise to see that the magic they're doing is all about confining and constraining and torturing and controlling these entities. And the further back you go, where maybe, you know, attitudes towards spirits and things like that weren't quite so strict and quite so aggressive, you'll see magical practices that don't show any of those. So that, I mean, that's on another topic. That's why I think that a lot of people spend rightly a lot of time trying to seek the origins of some of the gods that we worship today. And I think that's an important part of practice, but they oftentimes focus too much on that to where they start, you know, incorporating entities and worshiping gods in a paradigm that they may not even really associate with. And I think that's something that people should avoid.
Yeah, that's a tricky thing because, I mean, it's good to know that a lot of these daemons were not of an evil background whatsoever, and Christianity turned them into the adversary of Christ. But at the same time, knowing that's great, but if you are not of the civilization and of the background and of the knowledge and experience of the people who that was their God, you're not going to have the same experiences they did when they worshipped this god. So it's good to know your background. It's good to know as much as you can about an entity that you're going to be working with, but that is not the end all. There's a lot of other things to take into consideration whenever summoning.
Absolutely. And like I said, you know, a lot of these demons and daemons that are associated with Satan are predating any of that theology, and then some of the entities that you can start learning about are just completely foreign to any of the Western concepts at all, any of the Western civilizations at all. And some of them really do have power, and some of them are aggressive and malevolent. And, you know, it should be taken with a very serious, you know, grain of protection. But at the same time, a lot of the commonplace, you know, daemons that people use all the time are friendly to humans, and you can contact them without too much of a concern towards extra, you know, precautions. But I think a lot of it does also revolve around who you are. And, you know, when you take things down to a very simplistic level and talk about, you know, the universe is nothing but vibrations and frequencies, you know, if your frequency doesn't match up with what you're trying to call, you might want to be careful about that. Because even without them taking any, you know, special steps to make you pay for it, just the interaction between the two energies might not be good for you. So it's again a lot more complicated than most people want to treat it.
It is, and I like how you brought the metaphysical aspect into it. That, I mean, vibrations attract likewise vibrations, and sometimes they bounce off each other really harshly. And you have to know who you are as much as you know who the entity is that you're summoning, because if you don't know yourself, it's going to lead to a rocky road. I mean, some of these entities, some people want to believe that all daemons are evil. Some people want to believe that they're all good and it's all rainbows at all. If you treat them with respect, every daemon out there and demon out there is going to, work with you. That is not true. There's some fucking absolutely evil entities out there that don't give a shit about you summoning them, your circle, your triangle, what your intent is. They are just malicious beings. They don't want to be worked with. They probably can't be worked with. And there's a good chance that they're going to mess your life up in horrible ways. So you need to understand that there are good, there are bad. You need to find that middle ground, because I meet so many people that say every one of them is willing to be worked with. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what you've been summoning, because there's definitely some forces that I've come across dabbling in things that are a little bit different than your normal summoning, that they don't want to be worked with. And I've never been able to find a way to work with them, and they do have side effects. So, you just have to be careful out there, but knowing the background's important, but it's not everything. Don't treat everything that it's a rainbow. Don't treat everything that it's evil. Be sensible. Know yourself as much as you know what you're summoning.
Yeah, that's a great way to sum it up, I think.
Absolutely. So why don't we dump in, finishing in the first hour right now, rounding into the last half an hour. I want to jump into your work specifically. We got to find out a lot about what you think, what your beliefs are, some great subject matter. Now, I want to talk about what it is that you've presented to the occult world with your two books. Why don't you give us a breakdown of, first and foremost, Paths of Satan and what that is and what that would mean to the reader? And then after we kind of talk a little bit about that one, I want to jump into Book of the Fallen.
Okay, yeah. Well, Paths to Satan, I would probably consider more of a primer than anything else. And it was published in 2012, and we kind of touched on this before the interview began. But even in the 8 years that it's been since it was published, people are much more open about alternative spiritual practices than they have been within the last decade, and especially the last 2 decades. So when that book was first being conceptualized, there really wasn't much out there for a Satanist or even a Luciferian or another occultist to give to a family member or a friend that would at least give them some sort of idea of what their spiritual practice is and what it entails. And I felt there was a real need for that, because most of the times these people are looking at someone going into a satanic practice, and their big worry is is this person turning evil on me, and are they going to start murdering cats and all this crazy shit. And the most probably prevalent thing people would do was hand that person, their loved one, their friend, a copy of the Satanic Bible or another like core work like that, and say, read this and it'll give you an idea of what I believe. And that's just, in my opinion, too much for some of these people. Someone coming from a strict right hand path religious background, a Christian, a Jew, even particularly a Muslim, these people are not going to be interested in reading the Satanic Bible. They're not going to get through it. They're not going to, take any particular wisdom out of it. And it's not going to do what that Satanist or occultist wanted it to do, which was allay their concerns about what it is their loved one is getting into. So that's why I wrote Paths to Satan. It's a very short primer that's direct. You can hand it to somebody and they can read it in an hour or 2, an afternoon at the most, and it gives them a strong basis of knowing these are the different sects and beliefs within Satanism. These are the things that they believe. These are the things they don't believe, and these are the things that the religion and faith as a whole, as a community, frown upon and smile upon. And it doesn't mean that particular Satanists aren't doing things in both of those camps, but these are the things that are readily accepted within the community as good and bad, and that's what the real emphasis behind Paths to Satan was.
And I think you did a great job on it, because, like you said, there's a need for that. There's so many books that just jump right in and they don't give you the starting ground to, learn from as a practitioner, to maybe, hey, I'm really thinking I'm resonating with Satanism, but I don't know how to get started or really what it means. And then also, more importantly, I think for the family members and friends of someone that is from a strong religious background, because there's so many preconceived notions of what Satanism is and what it means to be satanic. And I think your classifications of the 3 main types of Satanism, being devil worshiper, theistic Satanist, and atheistic Satanist, really resonated with me when I read it, because I think that most of the people out there that automatically scoff when they hear you're a Satanist are automatically thinking the first. They're thinking devil worshiper. They're thinking, this person who's out there killing neighborhood animals and drinking blood and burning down churches and lighting crosses and forming pentagrams in the night in the woods robed. And it's not what you're thinking, and you dispel that pretty quickly, that is a form. There's always going to be people within any realm that are, kind of the extremists and maybe don't even see the main point, and they're lost in their own fallacy that they created. But then you start digging into the other 2 and you say, wow, I didn't realize that there's atheistic Satanists that they don't actually believe in Satan as a being, and they believe it as a current. They believe it as something of themselves. And then they do the theistic side, and they do believe it as in beings, but they don't believe that we're going to go out and just cause chaos and evil to everyone, that maybe we should treat everyone the same as they treat me. I'll be nice to you, you be nice to me. If you do me wrong, I will smash you with the hammer of our Lord, So it's interesting that, they don't know. And this clearly, concisely, and easily in a small book that you can read in a couple hours at most, as you said, will give anyone, the insight of what they need to know about this side of the left-handed path to be able to then make their own assumption from it and not go off of what they've been trained to believe their whole life because of their religion. Because I can tell you, folks, guaranteed, if you are a Christian, you're a Muslim, or you study Judaism, your religions have hurt and murdered and killed way more people than Satanism has. So before you cast any type of doubt on Satanism of being an evil type of religion, you might want to rethink that. Look into what we stand for. Look into what we practice, and you'll realize it's not at all what you thought. And many more lives have been lost in the name of God than they have for the name of Satan.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that, I used to say, because I didn't have, Path to Satan to hand to any of my family or friends. So, the best thing I used to be able to say was, please look at me and take into consideration my character and who I am, and allow that to shape your view of what Satanism is, as opposed to taking what you believe Satanism is and your tainted belief of it and attach that to what you believe my character is. So that was really all you had back in the day, was to say, please just, look at me like the person I've always been, and don't just automatically assume that I'm a completely different person that is looking to, be evil just because I've taken on this particular spiritual practice. So I've been greatly surprised with the amount of positive reaction that Paths has had, and I'm way over the moon grateful and appreciative of it. And for such a small work, because I will admit it is a small work, for it to have the impact it's had, it's really it has meant a lot to me.
No, I'm sure it has. I've seen it in a lot of groups. I've seen it in a lot of discussions. And I belong to quite a large bit of social media groups on, the occult and non-ceremonial magic and different practices. And I've seen both books be passed along quite, adamantly. But I've seen that be mentioned by a lot of people starting out on the path, or people, as we talked about, giving to their family members and saying, this helped someone I know understand my choice a lot more than they were originally willing to. And that's a big thing, because there's a lot of people who are stern in their beliefs of Satanism and wanting to start this path, and they lose all of their family and friends when they don't necessarily have to. Now, a lot of times that's still going to happen anyways, depending upon how devout Christians they are, but it can soften that blow or stop that, because maybe they just don't understand. Sometimes maybe they're never going to understand, but it gives you the tool in your toolkit to maybe open up the doors of understanding to people who just are ignorant of the knowledge, rather than just lose them. And I think that's an important tool to have.
Yeah, anything you can do to kind of bridge that gap. And because, like you said, these people are coming from it in a completely ignorant manner. They have no idea what the truth behind the practice is. So for someone to just set down at least, somewhat what it really is, I think it's important. And there was a big balance to be struck there between keeping it concise enough and short enough that someone who isn't going to be interested in these topics at all can still finish it and get through it, and still wanting to put in as much information as possible. Some of the rightful criticism I've gotten on it was, I included this particular group of people and not that particular group of people. I've gotten I kind of find it funny, I've gotten some pretty strong criticism about including demonolators but not Luciferians. And I have to kind of laugh at that. It's like, well, one, there are so many different types of Luciferians that could be its own book. And then two, it's like S. Connolly is the one that was kind enough to publish my work. So, I mean, yeah, I'm going to throw the nod to the demonolators at any chance.
No, and you should. I mean, I think that's a strong path. And like you said, Luciferianism is a tricky beast, because within that own subgroup you have like 50 different subgroups and strong beliefs, and that's the one group. If I normally get shit from any of my posts, it's from some of the Luciferian groups. I can post all kinds of stuff all day long and have a lot of people like what I say. When I post in Luciferian groups, you have a lot of people like it, but that's always the group that I have someone argue with the thought that I have. They're like, that's not what I believe. And I'm like, well, that's fine. I'm not asking for your belief. But it just seems like there's so much divide within the Luciferian community of so many different beliefs. And not that it's a bad thing, but it's its own thing. It's its own tree. It's not even a branch of the tree. It's its own tree.
Exactly. So, I mean, I was put in a position where, yeah, I can try to include that and like not do it justice at all and leave a lot of people upset that I just very gradually grazed over something that was way more complex than I was given it credit for, or I could not include it and just, you know, kind of stick to things that are going to be a little bit more palatable and, you know, more easily palatable time-wise to, like I said, someone who really isn't interested in the stuff at all to begin with.
No, makes sense to me, and I think you did a good job. You can never please everybody. There's always going to be someone that's angry. So kudos to you on the first book. Certainly think it was an important one. Now, before we jump into Book of the Fallen, I'm going to take my second quick break to talk about our second sponsor of the evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you a little bit about Limitless Liberation, and I'm going to read this from the standpoint of the owner as she sent it to me. Limitless Liberation was inspired by both Lucifer and Belial. Lucifer has been with me most of my life, as far back as I can remember. Belial, I started to work with when I was going through a very difficult part of my life. He completely turned mine and my family's life around for the better in a very short period of time. In return, he asked me to create Charger for him. He showed me the design. So I created the first Charger for Belial, and Lucifer wanted one next. From there, I had spirits lining up with requests for magical items. Some are control freaks, others will just inspire. They all are so individually different, but every single item created has power within it. Each item operates on many levels. They operate as an anchor for the spirit you're working with, thus aiding in making easier connection between the two of you. They also operate like a power cell or battery, where they already come with an inherent energy to them, but they become stronger as you feed them and pull from them during ritual, as well as strengthen your workings. Limitless Liberation continues to grow to honor the spirits we love and work with and to build relationships with. I certainly stand by that. Elena's work is just gorgeous. What she does, I call them pyramids of power. She makes individual sigilized pyramids of power, and I can say that certain times you'll look at someone's work and you can actually feel the energy through a picture. And this is it. You feel the actual energy. You can feel the presence of the daemons in it when you look at them. I have her working on a special commission piece coming up that's going to be pretty special for my patron daemon, which is Asmodee or Asmodai. And, you know, I can't wait to add this to my temple and to, you know, add it into my workings. So if you want to check her out, you can check her out at www.etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. So etsy.com/shop/Limitless Liberation. Check her out and make sure you check out Goetic Impressions as well. Both very, very great companies in the underground occult world. Two of my absolute favorites there are, and was excited to be able to partner with them and work with them. So make sure you give them some love, pick up some ritual implications. I can't talk tonight, and use them in your practices. I think you'll notice a big difference in the energy work if you start to use some of these guys' stuff. All right, so let's jump back into it. Martin, we have one book to talk about. We have a short time to do it. I think this is more of the important work out of the two. Not that the first book was not important. It certainly was from the standpoints that we talked about. But this book This book, my man, I think is huge for anyone starting to really want to develop their own practice as a Satanist. It teaches you the rights and wrongs. It teaches you from an unbiased opinion. It doesn't just say this is the only way to do it. It gives a clear-cut way of how you can do it and the different ways of doing it. But it lets you to be free for interpretation, to take it and learn from it, add what you like and resonate with, leave behind what you don't. And it has some very strong workings in it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this masterpiece?
Well, thank you so much for referring to it as a masterpiece. That I'll stick that one in my pocket for later. But no, the real inspiration behind that one was to give people a basis for standardized satanic thought and practice when developing a satanic personal pantheon and practice for yourself. For a long time, people really did believe that just Satanism was defined by whatever somebody said it was, and that may be true for their own personal practice, but as far as the satanic community in general, I don't think that is true. I think it does need to have a basis in history and in theology and in what we know and believe as Satan to be. So that is the book that I set down to write, and that became a Book of the Fallen. For an example, there's a certain satanic organization out there in the news, Satanic Temple, and they make the protection of children one of their tenets, and I believe maybe even they did too in the Satanic Bible. I need to revisit that, but there's this current of children are to be protected and they are to be off limits to anything that is going to harm them as far as Satanism goes, and that's great. That is an amazing thing to have. But where is the Satan in that? Where is the Satanism in that? We should explore these things and make sure there is a basis. So when you explore that and you look at it, yes, there is a strong satanic basis in that in history and theology for the protection of children. Just as Satan has protected and uplifted the will of humanity and our ability to determine our own destiny throughout history, that is the mandate that he sets down when Satanists deal with children. You are to protect their will. You are to protect their future and allow them to develop it on their own as they see fit, just as he's done for us. So these are the kind of things that you need to look at and the things you need to think about when determining what is Satanism and what isn't Satanism. And that was where all of the inspiration came from for Book of the Fallen, just as much as, like I said before, people referring people to the Twitter feeds of organizations and just absolutely unbased speculation and conjecture as to what Satanism is and what Satanism means, and that's what I went in there to combat.
You should, because I think that the problem with nowadays is everyone does find their information off the internet and Twitter feeds and this and that. You're not going to find true satanic knowledge on a tweet, folks. You need to dig in and do your research. You need to find sources that matter, because anyone can say their thoughts and feelings, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. A big part about Satanism is walking your own path and doing what resonates with you. But so much people feed the fire of falsehoods by saying things that are not correct historically, not correct in any form of light, and then you read it, and then you start telling your friends who are maybe interested, and everybody starts practicing something that's wrong. That's not where you want to start out. You need to go back and read books like this that give you a good view. And that's a thing. Is side note real quick, is people say, oh, you're a Satanist, you're going to kill kids and sacrifice children and shit. That's actually completely against what it's about. In fact, you had mentioned that, in history, it's about protecting children, and you weren't sure about, remembering if the Satanic Bible said that or not. No, LaVey strictly says in the Satanic Bible that one of the things that can never be done is thou shalt never harm a child of any sort in any way. They are very strong across all platforms of Satanism to never harm children. It's so different than what you've been force-fed from your own religion, because your religion can't prosper if they don't have the adversary. And what is Satan? He is the adversary. So that's
true, yeah.
That's how they've made it, and that's how they've force-fed it, and that's how they've taught it, and everyone believes these things that are just so opposite. When you realize it, as I said earlier, so many more people have died for your own religion than for Satanism. When you realize that you believe that it's about hurting children and killing animals, and it's not. It should never be about harming anybody unless they've done wrong to you, and to never, no matter what the circumstances, ever hurt a child. And you're like, well, holy shit, I kind of support this. Like, I kind of like what this is about. And that's why you need to read Paths to Satan, because it might open up your eyes and say, you know what, I don't even like my religion. I want to switch. Come play for our team. But no, that's an important thing. And this book will teach you the right methods of how to do so. And one of the things I wanted to touch on from this book that I hear a lot of debate on, and I don't understand why there's a debate, and I'm sure you won't either, is meditation. I think that meditation, personally, to myself, and I mean, you can, feel free to interject if you would like, but, I think it is one of the most important tools a magician has. I think it's more important than the amount of time you spent researching and reading, the amount of time you spend in the temple, the amount of time that you spend in the circle. It's more important than the tools you've crafted and consecrated. It is, to me, personally, the most important item that you have as a magician. What are your thoughts on that statement?
I would absolutely agree. None of them happen without meditation first. And, not to be too strong with it, but yeah, if there's somebody out there saying that they're a great magician, but they scoff at the idea of meditation, yeah, you're not doing no magic, bro. It ain't happening. So, you can get to a point where you can be proficient enough that your daily meditative practice won't resemble at all what it was when you began, because you won't need to work on the amount of things that you did at the beginning. But regardless, meditation is still going to be a huge part of any kind of magical practice, because one, you can't focus, you can't keep a particular thought in your head long without working it through meditation. You can focus, but the level of focus required for magic is so intense. It needs to be so clear. It needs to be so consistent and without interruption that, yeah, good luck doing that without meditation. And beyond that, when you get into energy meditations, when you get into energy work, adapting the body to withstanding the currents that you're going to be introduced to doing demonic workings, you will tap out way too fast when you get put next to actual demonic energy if you are not working yourself to be able to withstand them. And that is a big part of meditation as well. The longer you can withstand that energy, the longer you can stay in that channeled state, the longer you can stay in commune with that entity, the more you're going to get out of it. And to be able to do that, you have to work yourself. I believe that, the brain is the muscle, so is the spirit. You have to work the soul, you have to work the energy centers of it for them to strengthen and for them to be applicable to your magical practice. So, yeah, that's why it came up first in my practical section. It is the core component to any real magical practice, is mastering the mind so that you can apply and focus it towards your desires.
It's true self-discipline. I mean, if you do not know yourself, you cannot know the elements that you are working with. And we've said it a couple times, and we don't want to beat a dead horse, folks, but you must master yourself in all forms, and then you can master outside of your form. And I think, meditation, certainly for myself, is a very strong thing, because there's so much that can be done. It's not just one thing. It's a million different things, from energy work to clearing your mind and being able to astral project and travel, to remote viewing, to so many different practices. You had mentioned the section on astral temples, which is important. That's a very important thing that someone should, if you have not worked on, work to build. You need that for yourself. And there's a lot of people that I've come across, and the reason I brought this question up is I've met several, and I'm doing like the winky, finger thing, is I'm a great sorcerer. I'm a powerful magician and sorcerer, but they scoff at the idea of meditation. Oh, I don't really spend that much time meditating. I don't really meditate. And I'm like, so wait a second, you're a great sorcerer, but you don't meditate, you don't master your mind. Oh yeah. But then they'll tell you how they've done things like evocation and worked heavily with demonic spirits, and I always kind of laugh, because I'm like, how are you sustaining first off, the sight and feeling and communication with them without being in a trance state, which is a form of meditation. But how are you not being just folded like a lawn chair by the dark currents of these beings if you have no self-control and haven't built up your own armor, and which is done reflecting in meditation?
Yeah, and I mean, even just in working your own energy centers and adjusting your own body and spirit to higher levels of energy is what allows you to sit in the ritual chamber long enough to glean meaningful contact and commune with these spirits. I mean, when you are seriously doing this work and you get bombarded by these energies, if you're not used to it all, I mean, you'll lose your focus. You'll lose everything that's happening, and then you'll just sit there for a minute, realizing that you lost it all, and then it'll go, oh, well, I felt something, so that was a success, and really you just screwed the pooch completely because you could have really done something, but you weren't strong enough to handle it. And that's, I mean, like I said, when you get to a certain point, yeah, you are not going to spend the hours and countless time in meditation working all of these skills, but that's going to be replaced by actually doing the workings that rely on those skills. So it is a progression. It is and I put it in the book, some things you're not going to be able to do unless you master some of the earlier things. And it's the way it is. If you can't focus your mind long enough to imagine a pencil for 30 seconds, how are you going to honestly, truthfully, and with feeling imagine the downfall of someone who has wronged you and completely destroyed your life? How are you going to focus on that for 15, 20 minutes while you're raising the energy to direct it if you can't even focus on a pencil for 30 seconds? So it's it like you said, betrays people who may not be actually doing as much magic as they say they're doing.
Exactly. I think there's a lot of talk in the scene and not a lot of action. And like you said, it's if you can't imagine a pencil in your mind rotating and see it in detail, or see yourself sitting in an office at the desk and witness yourself in third person to be able to move around that. If you can't detail these things, then whenever your workings don't work, don't blame it on any other situation. Don't blame it on the daemons didn't work for me. Don't blame it on that the moon wasn't in the right position. Blame it on yourself, because your lack of focus and desire, your lack of dedication is the reason that your own workings don't work. Now, what I want to do real quick is, we are running out of time here. I'm going to fire three really quick things at you. I have something I want to read here, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening. Martin, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Why don't you tell us these three things? Why don't you tell us, do we have any other books that we can expect in the work from you? What is coming up that we can expect from Martin McGreggor?
All right. Well, you can look at basically anything that I'm working on currently at www.sinisterside.com. I do have more books in the works. Right now, I've taken a little bit of a nonfiction break to work on some of the other things I want to accomplish. So I have the first draft done and revisions kind of actively working on my first novel right now. I don't have a title for you yet. That's the one thing I'm absolutely terrible about is titles, so it probably won't have one up until like maybe an hour before it hits the publisher. But I finished my novel. It is an occult horror story set in Norway, in the forests of Norway. It has probably more of a suspenseful element to it than anything overtly terrifying, but it also has some hidden gems for practicing magicians in there that would probably look a lot more realistic in even a fictional environment than a lot of the other I'd call it magical or metaphysical fiction that's out there. So that's a good one to look out for. And then I'm also working on a tabletop role-playing game right now called Wounds of Earth. You can check that out at woundsofearth.com, and that is a post-apocalyptic tabletop role-playing game akin to Vampire or D&D. It's set in an alternate universe on Earth, and it's basically the Earth attacking humans for being the dickheads that we are, and everyone wears masks. So there you go. It is definitely a project of the times, and those are the two main projects that I have going right now.
And tell us again, what's the www site?
It'll be sinisterside.com for my personal site that kind of relays all of my projects, and then woundsofearth.com is the game URL. And then,
go ahead.
Sorry, beyond that one, I also have a magical combat game that I have in the works, and that'll be for PC and mobile platforms.
Wow, certainly keeping yourself busy. You heard it, folks. Make sure you check out both websites. Make sure you support this man in any way you can for the wonderful works that he has put out and is still currently working on. It's been great talking to you. The last two things I want to fire away at you. If you could give me a quick set of advice on what you would tell a neophyte or a dabbler in the scene starting out right now on their practice, is something you've experienced over time that it would be a great way of teaching someone of a younger generation, what piece of advice would you give them?
Get in the circle. To play into the theme of the show, do not armchair. Do not sit there and read all the books. I don't care if you haven't read a book yet. If you are interested and you are curious, sit down with a candle, sit down with whatever you have, and just open yourself up to the energies in the universe and see what comes at you, and you might be surprised. But whatever you do, do not delay your actual beginning of action, of doing the work. Because regardless of what you read, you might read 100 things that gets you to the point where you're doing things successfully, and then you will discover that you can get away, or you can do away with 95 of those 100 things that got you there, and still make it happen. And that's what you want to find, because once you find those things, then you can find the next 5 that are even more powerful than those, and you can keep going and going from there.
Great piece of advice. I couldn't stand by that even more if I had to. I mean, that's the best advice someone can hear out there is get in the circle, step in the circle, do the work, do the research, and just do it. Just take it by the horns and do it. No pun intended. So why don't you, for the last thing here, tell us who you would like to thank for your ascension and your progression and where you are at this time. Is there anybody out there you'd like to give a special thanks to?
Oh, absolutely. I would not be in the position I am at all without S. Connolly. Steph has been absolutely, she's been my daemon as far as my writing career. I wouldn't have anything if it weren't for the opportunity she gave me. So I would absolutely give a shout out to her. If you haven't read the complete book of demonolatry, it is the go-to for a lot of people, so you cannot miss that one. I would totally give a shout out to Bill Duvendak. If you have anything astrology related, just check out the guy's works. He will set you up for anything astrology related, and really spiritually related at all. He has an amazing array of great books that you should check out. I definitely got to throw a shout out to E.A. Coetting. He's a good friend of mine, and he's someone that people should really take a look at and give a little bit more credit to than maybe he gets. Definitely him, my buddy Jake Brown. He's a great guy. I absolutely love him. And I'll even throw a shout out to Stanton LeVay, who worked on a lot of stuff. He's a great guy that I really admire. And also the Talamancer. I've had a great opportunity to work on a lot of projects with the Talamancer, and he absolutely deserves a shout out as well.
No, absolutely. Every single person you just named, aside from your one buddy who I didn't personally know, every other name you know, I certainly know and have followed. I've read their works, worked with their works. Steph, I hope to have you on the show at some point if you're listening out there. If you ever want to come on, you let me know. Eventually, maybe someday we'll get E.A. Coetting on here as well. Huge fan, read many of his grimoires and his books that he's put out. I'm a very large follower of his work. And, Bill and everybody you named, certainly great works. The Telemancer, your work is top notch in the field on everything that you do with your amulets and your rings. It blows me away every time I see it, and just everybody. So thank you to all the listeners out there. I do want to say that we have some great guests coming up as well. Certainly Martin filled a great slot for the very first episode. Couldn't have asked for a better guest. Coming up, we got some awesome people as well. Next week, we got S. Ben Kane. We follow that up on the 12th of November with Ra Vega. Very, very powerful practitioner. I've been following him for a while. for a while as well. He doesn't have any books out or anything. He's not an author, but is a very strong practitioner, has a lot of knowledge in alchemy. Following that, we have Thomas Leroy from the Sect of the Horn God, and I'm very interested in picking his brain a little bit. Following that, we have William Tall on Gnome Magic, and that is on the 10th of December. On the 17th of December, John Vermillion, another great author and practitioner. And then one of my absolute favorite authors and occultists of all time. I'm going to jump back to it. I skipped the date purposely. December 3rd, my man Arundel Overman's coming on the show. Huge fan. Talk to him quite often. We pick each other's brains every day. And certainly excited to have him on the show as well. So great guests, always bringing you the best names in the occult and underground. So make sure you check out all of those episodes. Stay tuned. Share our show around. If you liked it, let me know what your thoughts were. I am going to finish the show tonight with a specific passage from Martin himself from his first book, Paths of Satan. If a religion dictates that the eternal fate of a soul should be determined by adherence to a list of rules, it only proves that control and obedience is the true pursuit, and not the spiritual health and well-being of those who practice it. But once a religion or belief system allows the health and happiness of its followers to become an afterthought, it has abandoned everything that it is supposed to be, and has become a true disservice to anyone who practices it. That's the thought that I want to leave you with tonight, folks. I don't think I could pick a better passage to finish up the show with. Think about that. If you are not a part of this path, maybe think about those words and think about what that means. Is what you focus on, is what you put your heart and desire to, watching out and looking out for your best interest or their own. So we're going to close out with that tonight. This is Knights of the Nephilim. I am Frater Crow, and our guest tonight was Martin McGreggor. Thank you so much, Martin, for coming on to the show, and we'll certainly catch you next time.
Brother Crow, it was a great time. Thanks again, man.
Take care. Have a good night.
You too.